Chillin', got it bumpin'.
What's up,
Sean, what's going on, man?
bro? How are you?
Good, man. Been in lockdown in SoCal. Been with all the kiddos. We got a newborn. Hair's growing out. Life is interesting right now.
Oh, all the things, man. You like this wallpaper?
Dude, that is epic. Where are you at right now?
I'm actually down off the coast here in California, taking my kids. They just finished homeschool, so I promised them we would take them to the beach after
That's
3 months
awesome.
after 3 months of not seeing their friends and being in lockdown. This was their present, so here we are.
That is awesome, man. What a time. What a time it is, man. Like, it is crazy,
Crazy.
probably. I know. I was telling my wife before we jumped on. I was really excited, man, to jump on with you. I feel like I've watched you from afar, and I know we haven't had a ton of interactions, man. But we've always, and it's like God's always crossed our paths somehow in different
Yeah,
gatherings, and man, I think just who you and your family are, man. We honor you guys so much
thanks,
with what
bro.
you've carried, man, with the church, what you've carried in politics, your views. I feel like you really are, man. You're really a trumpet for our generation, man. I just want to say we honor you guys so much.
Oh, thanks, bro. It's been so encouraging to see what you guys are doing and being able to applaud you from a distance and really just we've been really just encouraged that you're taking a stand and that revival sweeping through the high schools of America, and we need it now more than ever. So
Yeah,
we
it's
really
crazy,
really
man.
love you guys too.
Dude, it's so wild. I was thinking, like, before quarantine, I think when we kind of ended, we were at anywhere from 15 to 17,000 on depends on the week. It's kids
Hmm.
of students gathering weekly, and I just remember a lot of the schools we'd go into. I went into a school, Centennial in Compton, 90% African American school, literally off of Piru Street, which where the Bloods originated. And
Wow.
the only way I got in was there was a sheriff who was in Compton. He was a sheriff, and he was the top sheriff and the pastor in Compton.
Wow.
I don't know what it was like to sit under Dr. King or hear a Dr. King message, but when I heard this man speak, I thought this is probably the closest I'll ever
Wow.
get to somebody of that sort of authority. And so I remember when we went in there, we sat in his office, and we sat the African American pastor, sheriff, pulls up in his cop car. We're in his church office, and he literally told us how he moved from the suburbs into Compton. And before there's ever any like calling of crazy police or anything there, they'll literally call the sheriff because he's so intertwined with his community, and he typically could diffuse most situations just because of who he is in his community.
Wow.
And he's the reason why we got into that school. I was like, man, I want to get into Compton. He goes, what school you want? He goes, I've repainted all these gyms in every school. I make one phone call, you're in. And
Wow.
so looking now, I'm just like, man, like it's definitely needed. Like I feel like we've always said, Jesus is our only hope in America, but I feel like that was so theoretical before Corona and the
Yeah.
riots. I feel
Right.
like now the economy's crashing. There's crazy sickness. There's
Yeah.
cities that are burning. Now, really, I feel like America's humbled now to a place where we can really see an awakening.
Yeah. Come on, man. Come on. It
So,
it really is our only hope. And I think it's so important. I mean, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about today, but um, I feel like it's so crucial for us to understand, and I know it feels cliche, but we don't battle against flesh and blood, and we have to understand there are literal demonic forces that want to annihilate the fabric of our society. They want to bring a spirit of division. And I think when you look at what's happening out there, you can see the fingerprints of killing, stealing, and destroying all happening.
yeah, so
That's
true.
not that is
So true.
not in the nature of God. That's actually not his
So
job
true.
description. And so it's important for us to recognize that and understand, well, who's really at work here?
Yeah.
And we're believers, like
Yeah.
we are, and And yes, we need to fight for justice. Yes, we need to stand for what's right. But man, we're brothers and sisters in Christ. The kingdom, like that's what we're a part of, beyond race and skin color and stuff. So I just think right now it's important there's so much noise, man. And for those of you guys out there that maybe just stumbled on this today, like, man, I would encourage you today, like, shut off the noise and the opinions for a minute and like get in the prayer room with the Lord, get his heart. Because if you don't have God's heart in this season, you're just regurgitating the endless drone of the media that does nothing but cause division and strife. And you know what? We don't need more of that right now.
So true. I was up in my house yesterday. Me and my wife, man, we've had some. She'll say we don't argue. She'll say we have intense fellowship. It's the same thing. But we were having a moment where we're butting heads, and I just came to her and I was like, hey, honey, like I just got to be honest with you. Like I'm 29, I'm living through a pandemic. Our city is burning. Like I'm now a father of 3. We just had a son a month ago. I said my life. I went from traveling all the time to not traveling. I said everything that I've been in high schools for 10 years. Every school in America shut down. I said, man, we're in the craziest season. I said, but I can't just sit home. Like I'm like, I want to go out into LA and I want to pick up trash. I want to pray for people. Like even yesterday, I went on a walk with my dog and I'm at a bus stop. There's literally a African-American dude sitting there with a knife on his lap, like just out in the open. And I'm like, hey man, how you doing? And he just starts opening up. And at the end, I'm like, what's your name? He goes, it's Jordan. I'm like, can I just pray for you? He goes, man, I prayed this morning. That'd be amazing. Can you pray for me? And I feel like people are just wide up. We're going today literally with trash bags, water bottles, and prayer, man. That's our agenda. Like, there's people on the streets in LA, like they just need a massive encouragement, man.
Yeah.
So
I saw last night, you know, I've just been tracking with everything. Of course, we have, you know, we're a prayer and worship movement with people in cities all around the world, 300 cities around the world. So,
wow.
You know, we have I mean, of course, I'm an American and I ran, you know, in politics, and I have a strong heart for our nation and reconciliation and justice. But I have a little bit of even a broader perspective when it comes to the world and racial reconciliation among different cultures and different ethnicities all over the world. It's not just an American thing. It's a global thing. But I was watching last night, you know, as these guys were setting fire to the church right behind the White House, which is so insane to me. I mean, every president since 1815 has gone to this church, and it's one of the most famous things it's known for is that Abraham Lincoln went to a prayer meeting there before he went to the theater and got assassinated.
No.
Yeah, and you know, Abraham Lincoln, who abolished slavery. I mean, this is why this stuff doesn't make any sense. You know, like this is why you got to understand there's forces of wickedness and darkness. And so here's this church, you know, behind the White House that every president since 1816 has gone to and pray. Abraham Lincoln had a famous moment of prayer there, then went to the theater, got assassinated, and now it's in flames last night. And that's the point where we realize, hey, this is more than just more than just a fight for justice. This is being hijacked by demonic powers and principalities that are twisting this thing right now. You know, it was really like an eye-opening moment for me last night. Me and my wife were just in bed just praying, like, Lord, bring the peacemakers, bring the ones with true hearts of reconciliation that are going to bring freedom in the midst of this. You know, we're in a global pandemic. Like, like, I think people forget that. Like, 100 and, you know, it's like, it's funny how the news narrative can shift everything. And it's all of a sudden, it's like churches can't gather, people can't go to prayer meetings, pastors are getting arrested. Oh, wait, you can demolish your city. You know, it's like, what? I mean, we're in the middle of 110,000 people have died from this virus, and the economy has been, you know, completely ravaged, which I think it's important for people to understand represents the lives of so many, right? It's not this discussion if it's the economy or if it's lives. The economy represents lives. It represents kids that are starving because they can't eat. You know, it represents, I'm sure as you've seen down there in LA, you know, kids that,
50%
yeah, but
jobless.
right, it of course, but even what hits home is the children that depend on the food that they are given in school, right?
Yes.
Like they're fed in school now, and now they don't even have a way to get that because they can't get to school. They can't, you know, it because the buses aren't running. I mean, it's just like it's crazy. So we're in the midst of that. Then we have this race thing, and it's like these layers. And I'm just telling you, man, we are primed. If there ever was a moment in American history where we are primed for an awakening, the time is now.
Yeah. It's so good, man. It's been interesting navigating too, I think, as a young leader. You know, again, I'm 29, and I have a lot of good fathers over my life, which is the only reason why I've made it this far. Is I have really good men and an amazing pastor that has helped guide me. But I think, man, like, you know, even going out there today, I was like, man, I don't fully, like, I want to understand that, I want to connect, but I feel like the best thing I could be is present. And like you said, a peacemaker. So I told
Yeah.
my wife, I seen, I think it was Billy Humphrey preaching on the streets in Atlanta. And I'm like, those are the guys that need to have the microphones. Those are the guys that need to,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? They're bringing hope in the midst of chaos.
Right.
And so, yeah, man, like, again, I'm just so honored to jump on with you, man. And I just wanted to ask you, like, my wife, she's done all these questions for all the lives. I think this is my 29th or 30th live that we've done. We've had Todd, Lou, Chris Chiala. We had some incredible people. I had Catherine Mullins like last week. And my wife has always crafted questions. I felt like she's so good at crafting questions. Before I jump into those, what was it like going for you from, like, in the kind of the Christian scene into the political scene? Because I know, especially now, like, this is probably the worst time to get involved in politics ever. You know,
Yeah.
maybe like 20 years ago would have been a lot more easier. But I remember when you announced that you were you know, you were getting into politics, you were running. I was literally like, man, I remember, I think I said to myself, like, man, God protect this man, because he's literally about to go into the flame. And so what was it like navigating that for you, man? Like,
Well, you know, I think that for me, I mean, it was hard, man. I mean, I think, and you just have to realize, like, okay, you really come to a point in your life, and you know, this is happening. It's been happening throughout the years, but I think it's getting even more concrete. Like, am I going to listen to, you know, am I going to follow the fear of the Lord or the fear of men? And you know, if you're a musician and a missionary, and you know, you love to help people in war zones around the world and rescue kids from, you know, the sex trade, a lot of things that we've done, it's hard to not really like that, regardless of where you land on the political aisle. But it's like the moment that somebody raises their hands to engage in politics, first of all, you only have two choices, right? You either go red or you go blue. Like, it's just the way that it works here. But immediately you polarize your entire universe. And it was wild, and it still is wild to us, man. Like, we lost friends, we were misunderstood, there was hit pieces written about our family, there was stuff that was misconstrued, there's still stuff out there that's said about us that we never said or never did. And I think a part of why I was burdened to do this, I mean, I actually didn't even want to do it. I had to have, like, confirmation after confirmation after confirmation after confirmation. But it's just because I'm tired of the hashtags, and I'm tired of the tweets. And I'm like, I just want to be somebody of action that does something. I mean, I've never met a worship leader that decided to run for U.S. Congress. So I didn't really have a blueprint for how to do it.
yeah,
In fact, I didn't never meet anybody that ran
yeah,
for Congress. But I felt like the Lord was like, it was just the next step. And, you know, I prayed on the mall in 2000 as a 16-year-old, you know, in our movement with our high school, that God would end abortion, that he would bring justice and righteousness to the government, that he would raise up godly leaders. And I felt like almost 20 years later, I was stepping
wow,
into the fullness or the fulfillment of my very own prayers. And so, and now having said that, I'm thankful that I'm not continuing in my race right now. I feel like we really dodged a bullet, to be honest with you, not making it through the primary, because you're right, it is a crazy time. It's a global pandemic. You know, you have to raise a ton of money, right? Tons of money to even try to be competitive.
Does it make raising money for a Christian event look like nothing now?
Oh, bro. It is just, I mean, and that, I had raised millions for refugees and all of our different projects around the world, but to raise money for a political cause is so difficult. Even though the political mountain, if you look at the 7 mountains of culture, the political mountain is the only mountain that touches all other mountains.
Wow.
So it's the only mountain that regulates how every other mountain functions.
Wow.
And yet it's the place where I have found the least believers, the least on fire radical believers of any sphere of influence I've been in my life.
Dang.
And also the place with the most warfare.
Yeah.
I mean, we suffered an insane amount of warfare, and some of it is continued, but it kind of almost validated that we were called to do this. We
Wow.
definitely didn't sign up for easy. That's not the gospel. We don't sign up for easy. So, we had to deal with, the intensity of it. Obviously, being in California and being a conservative that stands for, that stands for, Judeo-biblical foundational values. I mean, that running in a district outside of the Bay Area, in between Sacramento and San Francisco. I mean, the whole thing was just crazy, right? And it was a fight, but at the same time, I do believe I never got the guarantee that we were going to win. I never was, I didn't do it because the Lord said, if you do this, you're going to be serving in Congress. I didn't even know if I wanted the job. I mean, still to this day, I'm like, oh, I don't know if I even want that job. But to take a stand for righteousness and justice, and to take a stand in America for the future of my kids, that's really why I did it.
Dang. You said something interesting, man. You said the fact that there was an immense amount of warfare validated. That is so counter Christian culture. I can't tell you how many people that they wait for this mystical peace. And I've always fallen on that side, man. Like when people are like, well, I don't have a peace. I'm like, first of all, you don't need a peace for common sense. Second of all, there was no peace at the cross. I guarantee you, Jesus wasn't like, oh, there's this massive peace. Like there are moments where it's just blatant, stupid obedience. And when I hear, man, like that's so encouraging, because I feel like a lot of believers need to hear that. Like sometimes the warfare, sometimes the depression or oppression you might feel, sometimes the anxiety that might go against you is actually the greatest validating confirmations. We're always waiting for this, like this again, these goosebump confirmations, man. What if we took persecution as confirmation? What if you took opposition as confirmation? I don't know, I've just never heard anyone say that.
Well, we live in a very self-absorbed, convenient Christianity culture, and I think that it makes it really difficult. Like, for example, even like, let's just jump back to the race issue. Sure, anybody can make a post and a hashtag and seem to appear like they're helping something. It takes a whole different kind of person to engage in bringing a resolution, to have the conversations, to help out in the inner cities and areas where it's tough. Like, be those kind of people. Don't be the ones, on the outside, the Christians thinking you're helping when you're really not. So I think it's important for us, and I love how you do this too. Like, God gives you a word for the high schools. He gives you a word for the next generation, and you go after the hardest high schools in America. We need more people like that. I mean, when Jesus, when he commissioned the disciples, he looked at them with a smile and said, I'm sending you out as sheep among wolves. Wow. Have fun. I mean, he smiled at them and actually prophesied to them that they were going to all die. Also with the smile, so I just think it's important for us as believers, like, dude, we got to get grit back. We need to get some grit back in the church. We need to get some grit back, specifically with millennial leaders. We cannot be so soft, man. Like, we got to charge into the areas that the Lord has called us to do it, realizing we are going to face resistance.
Yeah.
But the resistance alone is proof that what we're doing carries immense value.
Yeah, and I don't think that was taught as millennials. I think, we're the generation of participation awards. And I feel like it's, yeah, I mean, for me, I think a lot of who I am today, I moved out when I was 17. I come from a divorced family, an abusive family. My stepdad leaves my mom around Christmas time with my young siblings. I'm 17. I just got saved. My mom, they shut off our heat. We're taking cold showers in the middle of winter, and we're eating spaghetti from the Dollar Tree. And my mom comes to me at 17 years old. I'm a believer, and she says, "I can't afford you. You have to move." I'm like, "Where the heck am I?" And at the time, I'm leading worship at a church for a youth group. I'm like, "Where am I going to go?" Like, I'm a youth group worship leader. Like, I don't got no money. Like, and I've seen, though, God take that journey. And that's what's given me the grit to go into schools. I remember when I went into Compton, the principal told me, "Hey, man, like, we don't want to give you the gym because you're about to fill this gym with drug dealers, with gangbangers. Like, do you understand?" Like, he says, "What you've done in other schools, you can't do here. Like, the school behind me here, this is South Central." I mean, my first gathering I ever did here was 200 kids. First meeting, and they hadn't had a Bible club there in 16 years.
Wow.
And when I went into Compton, they're like, "We can't give you the gym." And I begged them for months. And finally, the principal said, "Fine, we're going to give you this gym. We don't know what's going to happen." They gave us the gym, and 300 kids out of a school of 700 kids, 300 were coming to the Jesus Club. And I remember, like, there would be moments, there'd be bags of weed left in the gym after, or you'd see kids trying to jack pizza boxes, but that's where I met the Lord. Like, I'd see him in those places.
Yeah.
And I feel like now, to me, like, I felt so dumb when I did a live with Todd. And I was like, "Yo, Todd, like, what do you think God's saying?" And, typical Todd, he's like, "Same thing he's always been saying, buddy." I'm like, "Yeah, you're right." I was going to say that. Like, I literally feel like the message hasn't changed. Like, it's just now we got to look at our methods of how are we going to reach people now in the midst of craziness.
Yeah. Amen.
So, yeah, man, when I wanted to jump in, my wife just shot me a few questions, man. What was it like navigating with your family? One of the things I love that whenever I see your posts, a good majority of them is your kids are singing, your kids are worshiping, your kids are declaring. You guys watch the NASA launch. Like, I feel like you're embodying what I would encourage most Christian leaders and believers to do is as a family. What was it like going through this with your family, with your children? What was it like for them kind of seeing the world now in a whole new light?
You mean on the political stuff?
I would say on everything, man, because from your missions trips
Yeah.
to around the world to your refugee work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important for us to, there's a couple different like methodologies around parenting. And I think some people, they either choose to kind of build their life around their kids, and then other people decide to have their kids join their life. And I think it's really important for us to create a journey and a narrative that our kids can be a part of. Because if the kids end up becoming the journey, they end up most of the time self-absorbed with a very small worldview and perspective. And so for us, we kind of built our framework around parenting of having our kids be involved in the action, for them to grow up, going with us to Iraq in the middle of the height of ISIS, so that they would not build up a worldview of fear against Muslims or hatred against the Middle East, but that they would be on the ground watching God break out in the midst of war. Same thing in the I guess you could say in the political realm. That one was a little more difficult, I think, because the campaign trail has not typically been a place for children. It's very intense. But I felt like that my kids actually really carried the message for California, actually for America, bright-eyed, full of optimism and hope, knowing that we have a lot of things in our nation that we need to change, that we need to bring healing to. but yet always carrying the perspective. I love that verse in Isaiah. It says that in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord seated high, and the whole world declared the earth is full of his glory, or all of heaven declared the earth is full of his glory. And so sometimes there's a beauty in the perspective of children to not even realize what they're up against. And we as adults, we can get so intellectually, we can get so heavy by so much that we know, we forget the simple principles of the gospel. And this is why Jesus said, unless you become like a little child, you can't even inherit the kingdom. It's because we need that perspective to understand, like sometimes we get too inundated by what we know, and it prohibits us from having childlike trust. So I would say that not only I feel like my kids probably have a worldview that a lot of kids growing up in America might not have, but I feel like they've also been a gift to us as they've been able to remind us of the simplicity of who God is, that he's still on the throne, and the whole way that they approach life has been very, very innocent and pure. And so we're really thankful. And my encouragement is that more people would do that. At the same time, our children are not fragile. The Holy Spirit can speak to them. He can take care of them. They've seen the worst devastation on planet Earth. My children have seen with their own eyes. Took my daughter with me about 4 months ago, and we went and visited a project we have in rural India, villages of India, where we're rescuing temple prostitute children that are rescued out of temple prostitution at the age of 5 years old. They're perpetually molested every day. And we have a project of rescuing them. And I brought my daughter there to see it firsthand. And there was a lot of conversations and a lot of tears and a lot of, how can God overcome this? But yet at the end of the day, she comes out with such a strong perspective. And so anyway, we need to engage with our kids. They carry massive keys for breakthrough in our lives.
Yeah, so good. How important is it to you to have a global worldview? I feel like that's why even in your worship, you can hear the difference, I think, from where you sing, because you've sung from seeing kids taken out of the sex industry. You've sung from now, even on the other side, seeing politics. You have a very well-rounded view of life. How important is that for believers to connect even with their faith, so they don't think that they're serving an American faith or they're serving a westernized faith, which I think that's what probably you've probably been in so many churches and you've probably seen that. Like, man, like you go to these other countries and you're like, man, there's hunger here. Yeah. You come to America sometimes, it's like, where's that hunger?
Well, I think you can have an intense love for your nation, to want to see God come and show up, and you can have an extreme pride in the people that God placed you in to live and to raise your kids in. But at the same time, you can have a heart for the world, and you can have a heart to realize that 95% of the global church doesn't sing in English and they don't look like us. Wow. And those two things don't have to be mutually exclusive. And a lot of times you find people on either side of the ditch where they're like, screw America, it's the self-absorbed gospel. And I used to be probably more in that camp, where I was like, forget the American church, and I came, finished high school and I was ready to just live in a hut somewhere and be a wild evangelist. And so the Lord had to really turn my heart to care for America. But at the same time, we got to understand that the hottest places of God moving are around the world are in places like the underground church in Iran. It's all over the Middle East. They're in places like North Korea, and there's so much for us to learn from the church in these parts of the world. And that was really initially my first heart, and joining Bethel Music when we moved to Reading was to see some of the artists and the musicians go into refugee camps, go into places where nobody knew their name and nobody cared about their song, and to come face to face with the raw, organic, fiery underground church, and I think that it's funny because a lot of times we think that we have something to bring to them, but in reality, we get there and realize we
Wow.
receive way more than we could ever give.
Dang, that's so good. I wanted to ask you this. You've been a part of missions around the globe. You've been a part of Bethel Church. You've been a part of politics. And within all of those, there's obviously been persecution. There's obviously been hardship. How have you been able to maintain the joy that you've carried in the midst of seeing the most horrific crimes in other countries? Being a part of Bethel Church already carries controversy within the church. And then it's like on every front, you've probably confronted these moments where offense was so easy to bite into or go into. How have you maintained your ability to keep smiling the way you do, to keep loving your family the way you do, to keep leading the way you do?
Oh man, it's every day. I mean, it's controversy and it's attack and it's people misrepresenting you and I think that it's like we cannot be leaders that we're perpetually walking on eggshells, you know. And I think I had to move again, going back to the fear of man over fear of God thing. I had to move into a place in my own life where I'm like, you know what? At the end of the day, uh, I am not accountable to the mob. You know, I'm not accountable to a group, you know, to groupthink people that are forcing me into a narrative. I am not accountable to the Instagram culture. Like I'm accountable face to face to the Lord, where at the end of the day, I have to come before him and say, did I do what you called me to do? And I think that has to be the thing that motivates us. If not, man, we just end up blending into a sea of voices that that a lot of times kind of have their own agenda and their own plan. And I think for us to be a voice like John the Baptist, you know, crying in the wilderness, we have to have the constant steadfastness of that secret place that causes the washing of the offense off of our heart, you know, like washing of offense. And it's difficult, man, because it comes in so many different ways. It is constantly like a barrage, and the kind of the higher that you go, or the more things that you engage with, the more backlash you get. And I get it, man. I get why no Christian wants to be involved in politics. I've experienced it firsthand. I understand. Like, no wonder why Christians, I mean, the church demolishes you. Like the church eats their own when it comes to believers engaging. If you want to be a celebrity and make $1 zillion, or you want to be a football star, or you want to be a businessman that crushes it, or you want to be in the fashion, we know how to applaud those people. You want to be a politician in the church? We have no idea how to support that.
Wow.
I mean, we destroy our own. And so, you know, at the end of the day, you really have to have that, your heart anchored in the secret place. You know, that has to be the place where you go to for validation from the Father, where you feel his heart and seek his pleasure. Otherwise, you just get blown and tossed by the wind.
Yeah. How instrumental was Pastor Bill in your life in this season? Having a father, having a mother covering in that way. Like, how instrumental was that for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was, you know, I was so thankful. I mean, that's one of the beautiful things about this season that we're in as a family, is we just feel so covered. And, you know, I have boards, and I have, you know, a lot of legal boards. I have several different nonprofits, a lot of oversight in my life, a lot of friends that check in on me, how my heart is doing, how my marriage is doing, how my family's doing. But, you know, the fathers are such a huge piece. And, you know, when a father comes to you and is like, you know, shoot you a text message, or, you know, replies to one of your stories on Instagram or whatever, and just is like, you're amazing, you're doing it. It just shoots, like, I mean, you've experienced it. It just shoots confidence into your spirit, you know, and it's so vital for us to have that encouragement, especially for leaders facing intense situations in the hour we live.
Yeah, that's so good, man. And how has your wife navigated this season with you? How, like, what has been the strength that she's brought to your run? Obviously, from nations you've gone to
Yeah.
where you currently are right now.
Well, she is just so constant and steadfast, and she's pretty fiery. I mean, I think people look at her and they see that she's an amazing mom, which she is, and she's incredibly flexible and full of joy. But she's a fighter, and when there's something that's worth fighting for, like she feels worth fighting for, like she'll line up. She's the one that pushed me. What happened is on the political thing, this law came down, I think in Sacramento, saying um, giving the state control to have children that are 12 years old and up start to have sex change therapies without parental consent. And I think that was one of the things when a couple bills like that came forth. She looked at me and she's like, "All right, you got to do this.
Wow.
Like, it's time to fight. It's time to fight for our families. It's time to fight for the future of our kids. So goes California. So goes the nation. Let's do this." And her being behind me in that, and that's kind of what I was waiting for. I'm like, I'm not going to do this
Yeah.
unless my wife is on board. I don't go to a war zone around the world unless I feel like she's behind me. But when she gets the word of the Lord, she's immovable. She's immovable. It's amazing.
So awesome, man. And what would you say when you guys, you guys started dating in high school? Was that when you guys
Yes.
started?
Mm-hmm.
I think I seen something on that. When you started dating her in high school, was there any glimpses of who you were going to marry, like the woman she is today? Was there glimpses back then of like, because I think it's important, man, as people are thinking of their spouses, God knew who you were going to be back when you were in high school to now. And I think had you probably married any other woman, you wouldn't be able to do half the things you've done now.
Yeah.
So what were those attributes you looked into when you were younger to like say, man, this is qualities of someone that I want to be with?
Man, I wish I could have had a blueprint to roll out to everybody to find a wife like mine. I feel really fortunate. I was 16, she was 15, and I just feel like I kind of got her young before she knew how crazy I was. Um, but I think that the thing that I really looked for is she loved the Lord, and she was passionate about pursuing his presence. And I'm finishing a book. I'm actually going to have to jump back into writing here in a minute, but I'm writing a little bit about her story. And one of the funny things is she had a really traumatic missions experience. Like right before we got engaged, I had bought the ring. I was finishing college. She had the worst missions experience you could ever imagine. She went with an organization. I won't say which one because we still do a lot of stuff with them today. But she went and it was just horrible. Infighting in her leadership, like really no purpose. I mean, they didn't believe in the gifts of the Spirit. It was crazy. And it traumatized her. And then she was over in the Pacific Islands and she got stung by the most poisonous jellyfish, one of the most poisonous in the world. And she was actually laying flat out. She was paralyzed for like 2 days from this. And so she came back and I had the ring and I was ready to go to the nations. And she's like, "I'm never leaving America again. I'm never doing missions. I'm never
Oh my
getting."
gosh.
And I was like, "Whoa, hold up. Like, what is happening?" And so anyway, but I just trusted the Lord, and I feel like a lot of times, and maybe this is encouragement, I think a lot of times we look for, our spouse, or I see specifically more millennials, as they get older, they get really picky and they try to make sure every box is ticked. And I want to encourage you, like, the Lord knows, like, if I would have waited and not gotten married because I was waiting for all the boxes, like, it would have never really happened. But we just followed the Lord, and I knew that he would move in our hearts, and I knew that he would change, and I knew that he would bring dreams, and he would bring encouragement and confirmation, and he did. And now, my wife that was afraid of the Middle East, that never wanted to go to the nations, that,
Wow.
just a few years ago, we walked in with our 3 babies, when ISIS was 10 miles down the road. So the Lord really has done a lot in her, and the Holy Spirit is powerful to transform. So, man, God's got it under control. Just follow him.
So good. Well, Sean, thank you, man, so much for your time. I want to let you got to be with your kids, and man, thank you so much, man. You're seriously a hero to our family. Hope to do more things with you in the future, man.
Yeah,
And
bro.
when everything kind of lifts, man, it'd be awesome to ever get some hang time. But thank you so much for jumping on, man.
Yeah,
We love
bro.
you a ton, man. Thank you.
We love you guys too. Thanks for having me. And man, we'll be praying for you as you go out there today.
Yeah, thank you, man.
Bring
All
the
right, man. You have a
kingdom,
good
bring the
day.
peace.
Yeah, we will. All right, man. Take care.